clickies.
Ready?
Yeah. Good Sunday morning to you, Columbus, and welcome again to another edition of Down the Garden Path, your weekly gardening show where we talk about tips for your garden and things that we can do for you. Down the Garden Path, as always, is sponsored by Greenscapes Landscape Company. Greenscapes is one of the most well-established landscape companies in Central Ohio, and we've been helping clients for a long time with everything outside. And we encourage you, if you have a project you'd like to talk to Greenscapes about, please call the office at 614-837-1869 or email at info@greenscapes.net, and please get a hold of us. We can come right out and help you out. So there's our short blurb about that. But today we have Michael Morris with us to help
Facilitate.
Guide our listeners through this journey of the landscape.
God, I love the way you just said that. Mark, today we're going to talk about 10 things that pro landscapers do for their yards every autumn, which also means if they're treating your property, these are the same things they're going to do for you.
Correct.
So let's start with number one. They give their lawn one last cut. Why do they do that?
You do that for a couple reasons. Your grass will continue to grow a little bit over the wintertime and early in the spring. So you want to keep it short. And actually, if you mow your grass at the correct length, you should actually lower your deck one click to mow it a little bit short. But you don't want to scalp the lawn. You don't want to get it into the crown. Most people cut their grass too short.
You mean in general? Or
in general.
When you're doing this last?
Yeah.
I notice a lot of people do kind of get it down to the nub, and then you have a lot of dirt exposure.
Yeah, that's too short.
Especially when it rains, it looks like you got clumps of mud in your yard.
Exactly. So most people do cut their grass too short. If you think about, oh, I love the smell of grass. Well, that's usually bad because the grass, you cut it too short and it's damaged and it's really trying to repair itself. So you've cut it too short. You shouldn't really smell your grass after you cut it.
Is it typically, rule of thumb, is like 3 inches?
3 inches, you want to be about 3 inches. So
and that's year round. That's not just this last cut.
Right. So the last cut, you want to go a little shorter. Don't scalp it, though. And, the other reason is there's some funguses that'll come up over the wintertime and some molds, which the big one's called snow mold, which you see in the springtime because your grass looks like it's been dusted with powdered sugar. It has this white powdery
is it like a film, or is it more of like a powder?
It's like a powder because if you walk through it, it'll get on your shoes if it's a little wet. And really, that's what you're trying to keep the grass a little short so that stuff doesn't build up as well.
The next one is testing the soil. Now, why would you have to do that? As a homeowner, I don't know how many people actually follow through with that, but in your line of business, I'm sure that's something you guys do.
Yes. Testing the soil is something you want to do to check to make sure your plants and lawn have the correct nutrients. People just get the bags, throw them on the grass, or, and you see your green grass growing, and usually everything's fine. But if you have a deficiency where your grass isn't growing well or your plants aren't growing well, and a general fertilizer isn't helping, sometimes you have something specific you need to treat for. You see this a lot with trees where they need a specific element or to help them grow, and so that's what you're looking for if you're having problems. You want to test the soil to make sure you have everything you need, or if you need to add something specific, not just a general fertilizer.
How do you test for that? You're testing for the pH balance, right?
Right, pH and the nutrients. There's different lists that they go off of that they can test for, and there's some soil testing places. I think some garden centers actually have ones that you take a plug and you mail it in.
Oh, I've seen that actually, where you're taking out of your lawn yourself. But if you're going to do it on your own, how accurate is that test?
It's pretty good because you send it to a lab, and they actually, people with white coats come in and cut up the soil and do their the soil down.
You know it's real if they have white coats.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's how you look professional.
Yes. So if people are doing this on their own, let's say they don't have it tested, you're just wasting your money if you're putting any product down, right?
You
you're
can
not
be.
testing it.
Yeah, you can be. I mean, if everything's green and looks nice and you're just using a general fertilizer, usually that's okay. But if it's really when you have a problem that, you need to find out specifically how to treat and what to treat for. And that broad-based soil test will tell you you're high in nitrogen, you're low in potassium, and so on down the list of the different elements that make up a soil.
Can that be just, on certain or in certain areas? Like, the back of the lawn, if you're getting more moisture back there than another, is that where you can lose some of the nutrients?
Yeah, it can vary across your whole property. I mean, you think about a normal residential property, it can still vary depending on how the builder graded out your house. If you brought in soil because there was a low spot, so you could have native soil in the front yard, they could have brought in a couple truckloads of soil for the backyard, which could be from some other part of town, and that could be a completely different soil profile. So you could have green grass in the front yard and your grass in the backyard you've always struggled with, and you've used the same fertilizer front and backyard. Well, maybe in the backyard you need to treat a little differently.
Or you could reseed it, which is number 3 on the list.
Oh, what a segue.
Yeah, that was not intentional. It was perfect how you walked right into that. So the reseeding aspect, you've got this area where you've had it tested and you figure out what you need to balance it out. Now, here's my question about reseeding. Are you doing just that spot, or are you doing an entire lawn? Are there 2 aspects of it?
Yeah, the bigger aspect is in the fall, you want to add more grass seed to your grass in general, because you get a lot of...
Every time?
Just about every year you want to add some more grass seed, because as the grass plant grows and spreads, parts of it naturally just die off. And so you need to keep adding more seed to make sure your lawn is strong and healthy, because you need to make up for some of the grass that's naturally dying.
And do you retest that to make sure? I mean, you're planting more, right? So you've tested the soil. Do you have to retest it again just to make sure? Or is it a visual thing? You can see it and you go, oh, it's back to where it needs to be.
Yeah, you can usually just look at it and then test it periodically as you see a problem come up.
Now, at Greenscapes, do you guys test it anyway? Do you come out to see what you're up against, or is it something you have to wait for and someone says, well, this isn't growing in this area?
Usually most of the time, everything looks good, but when there's a big problem, usually we'll send it off. There's a lab in Westerville that we send things locally to get soil tests. We had that last year at a project in Upper Arlington where we had a problem with some plants growing, and we had the soil tested and we found the soil was a little low in one part, and we treated for it and we got everything turned around.
Do you see it a lot in say, the newer build areas within, say, the last 5 to 10 years? Do you see kind of like a repetitive pattern because of the way somebody has built homes in that area?
Well, traditionally, the neighborhoods that we have now, usually a farm field, trees, forest, they come and cut all that off. They strip the topsoil off to some degree, grade it all out, spread the lower soil around, build the roads, put in the infrastructure, and build the houses. So you've lost that native good topsoil that was built up. If you look at parts of town, especially like Bexley, that's all native soil. So if you dig a hole in Bexley, the soil profile there is tremendously different than a newer part of Grove City.
Well, I would imagine it would be like Richard, like Pinnacle, where that's only been, I think that's 10 or 12 years old.
Yeah, it's like 10 years old.
But if you've got Bexley, some of those homes have got to be 80, 90 years old.
Oh yeah, they're 100 years old. And when they built those houses, they just showed up, they cut some trees down to open up the area, dug a hole, built a house. So that all that soil that's been building up for thousands of years is still there. And there's plants that we can grow in Bexley that grow well that won't grow other parts of Central Ohio.
Just because of the soil.
Just because of the soil. And also because it's more sheltered from the winter by the city, but most of it has to do with the soil profile.
I was just curious because when you're looking at these new builds, I would think a builder's thinking about, I've got to make or build X amount of houses. Mm-hmm. So I don't really care what happens after I build it. It's up to you to get the lawn to grow and maintain it.
Right.
But you do see some of those parcels of land where some of the grass isn't growing right, and then right next to it is this flourishing green lawn.
Well, yeah, a good example of that happening is, a lot of times when we do a new construction house, when we're doing all the bed work, we have all of our new topsoil that we bring in for the plants. We'll dump it in the front yard, and then we'll move it around to all the beds. Well, that area that we've spread the soil out in the front yard is usually looks a lot better, because there's just that little bit of soil that we've left that you just can't scrape up, that's helping the grass grow more more vigorously than the other parts of the yard.
Well, you brought up beds. So again, you're doing this right. You're segueing perfectly for me. The next one is fluffing up mulch or mulch beds.
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose behind that?
Well, during the summertime, you can get the mulch and it'll get kind of hard and sticky, where it's formed a layer that is almost impenetrable by water. So you need to break it up, and that does a few things. It loosens it up, it brings some of the color that's underneath back to the top, and it helps to keep the plants insulated for the wintertime. So also, when you're fluffing the mulch, you want to check the depth. You want to maintain a 2 to 3 inch depth, and that keeps those roots insulated from this wintertime, cold in the wintertime, and also keeps moisture in the beds.
And it also helps get rid of insects and rotting.
Right.
It's going to keep water from absorbing in that plant material.
Sometimes we see this more on commercial properties that we take over, where they've mulched too thick, and they have 4 or 5 inches of mulch, where there'll be mice and rodents that dig tunnels in that mulch, because it's a great place for them to live. So
it's more of an aesthetic look at that point than it is functional, right? If you got that deep a mulch bed, I'm sure it looks nice from as you're driving past it, but there will be rodents and insects that are burrowing into that.
Right. And mulch too deep creates the opposite of what mulch is supposed to do. When you have mulch too deep, it doesn't have enough oxygen to decompose, and it takes nutrients out of the soil rather than put nutrients into the soil.
And it makes it harder for the water to be absorbed as well.
Because it's shedding it off. So breaking up that mulch and turning it over makes it look fresh again. You can check your depth, and there's a lot of good things to that.
How often? That's just a once a year thing.
I mean, usually in the summertime at some point too, depending on when you mulch in the springtime.
So if you mulched in, March or April, depending on the weather.
Yeah, you probably and you just get a nice hard rake, and you just take that rake and just sort of break it up a little bit, and then do it once in the fall.
So on top of that, this is what people in your business, right? So we're talking about professional landscapers. They make their own mulch. How do you make your own mulch?
Well, you can do that with some leaf litter, and it's more leaf compost.
That's your own leaf litter. I mean, it's
Right.
not something you're buying just in case someone goes, I'm going to go to Home Depot and buy
some
leaf litter.
You can buy that at some of the garden centers. And basically,
Wait, do you mean like the legit garden centers, or like you're going to Walmart garden center?
you might be able to buy it there, but I know you can get it at the garden centers, because we buy it sometimes for planting beds. So you can take leaves and compost them, and you can incorporate that back into your beds as a beneficial nutrient to add some natural organic material to your beds.
But that's assuming you have a lot of trees on your property.
A lot of trees and a lot.
If you have 2 trees, it's probably going to be hard to do those beds.
Right, and usually you shouldn't use thicker leaves like oak tree or something really thick, or like black walnuts, because some of the chemicals that are in them. So you want to look for usually thinner leaves, like maples are usually real good. Elm trees are usually good. Some small and
Well,
fine
that would
that'll
make
break
sense
up.
then why you could buy it at a store, because somebody might be, if you're in a Bexley or something, you might not have the proper trees to do that. So that does make sense why you could buy it.
Right.
See, I was knocking it for a minute, and now I want to take back me knocking the fact you could buy it at a store.
You can buy anything at the store. I'm sure you could buy it on Amazon too.
I've never heard of that. It's a small little startup.
Yeah.
Okay. So as far as number 6, they do some planning and planting, and that's not 2 different things, right? You got to plan it out before you put it in the ground.
Right. We have a lot of clients, or not a lot, of clients who always ask us about getting started quickly. And we always say, we'd like to draw everything out correctly, because it's a lot easier to erase lines on a piece of paper than move, big 400-pound boulders and move big trees in your yard. So we want to try to plan everything out for what we're going to do in the springtime. And we want to take our time, because we don't want to rush into it.
Do you think that more people, this is what I see at least based on what Bill and Mark and yourself, the other Mark, the deep voiced Mark, will say springtime is when we are so busy because everybody calls and they jump on board. Do you see that they're making a lot of fall decisions? Like they're saying, this is what I want for spring. It seems to me the heavy up is always in the beginning. When you see any marketing or any advertising, it is always March, April, get going now. But it seems like they're dovetailing off and not focusing on the fall. If you did it in the fall, you've got something that's going to flourish March, April already, and then you can add to, right?
Yeah, exactly. I like fall projects because you get to see it in the springtime. So you get a quicker payoff on your investment. We're working with a client in Grove City right now about redoing the landscape and the pavement around their pool. And they're like, well, should we wait till spring? And I'm like, well, we're going to be here in the spring. The weather's bad. We may be here in June still working, which I'm sure at that point you'd like to be using your pool. So I'm trying to keep them on track and kind of push through to try to get this in the fall, so we're ready for the spring and the project can be done.
But I would think a lot of people, and again, you have more expertise on this, it would seem like more people are thinking springtime is the best time to do this, when right now that thing can be popping in March,
right,
if the weather's good.
We always want to advise people to think a season ahead. If you want it in the springtime, call us in the winter or in the fall. If you want it in the fall, call in the spring or in the summer. You know, when you push things back too far, you know, any good landscape contractor is going to have a 6, 8, 10 week backlog just for their construction schedule. So from the time, you know, design takes 3 weeks, construction 6 weeks, that's 9 weeks you have to wait from the time you called in.
Right.
And if you'd like to call in, you can always call the office at 614-837-1869 or email Greenscapes at info@greenscapes.net. And we're going to take a quick break because we've been rambling on for quite a while. But please join us right after this break.
That segue was dirty. I was like, and if you'd like to get, yeah, you would. All right, we're going to go with...
Good practice.
You're doing extremely well.
I should be syndicated.
We'll work on that. I would love to tell Bill what it would take to do that. Let's see. We're going to start with give their driveway and walkways some TLC. Tables, ladders, and chairs. Okay? All right, you ready? Don't fuck around. Yeah. We're professionals. Gia!
Yeah.
Give it a Gia. All right, you ready?
Yeah. And welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us here on Down the Garden Path. If you ever want to send in your questions to the show, you can call the Greenscapes office at 614-837-1869 or email your questions to info@greenscapes.net. And we are always here to help you with your outside projects. And today we're talking about, I saw some leaves starting to turn a little bit, so we're thinking about fall a little bit.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up where we left off. Number 7 on this list of 10 tips that all pro landscapers do for themselves and also for their customers. They look to give their driveway and walkway some TLC.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Well,
I mean, I know what TLC means. I just mean, how do they look at driveways and walkways? If you're going to somebody's property or your own, what is it you're looking for that's important to you?
Well, all hardscapes, you have to think about them. You know, this includes pavers as well. You know, just cleaning off, you know, power washing everything, getting all that debris off. You know, there's a lot of dust in the air, dirt. You want to get all that cleaned off. You know, get your asphalt sealed, get the cracks filled. Same way people don't seal concrete like they should. Concrete needs to be sealed every few years too. So get them cleaned off and get them sealed. Same way with your pavers. You know, it's a good time to do some paver repairs. Make sure everything's in good shape. Maybe adjust some of the edging.
How do you protect or fix a paver? We've talked about putting them in, but what can you put on? Is there a sealant? Or?
Yes, you can do a liquid sealer. It's a pretty easy Saturday project. You just get a big roller and a big paint pan, put the sealer in, and just start painting it like you would a wall.
Is it an instant dry or is it something kind of like?
It takes a little bit of time. Usually when we do it for clients, we use a sprayer because you got to be careful with the rollers. because if there's too much debris in the cracks,
You're
when the
sealing
roller
it in.
goes when the roller goes over the cracks, it pulls some of the debris out, and you get it in the sealer on the paver.
I see.
So we like to use a sprayer and just spray it on.
Do most companies do that, or is that just something that Greenscapes do?
Because of the look of how, it gives the pavers a little bit different look. We leave it up to our clients to decide if that's something they want to do or not, because it's going to put a little bit of a sheen to it, and it's sort of like paint now, where you can get a gloss, semi-gloss, flat, but it does changes the color a little bit and does put a little bit of sheen to it. Some people like that, some people don't, so we leave it up to our clients to decide what to do.
But that would be doing it in the fall. Does that sheen come off as snow and rain has hit it, or does it stay on?
It stays on, and it stays on for usually, depending on the product, the sun, how much traffic it gets. It's the same thing for any sealer. Same with your concrete sealers. Sometimes they can last longer than other places. If you have a nice patio, it doesn't get a lot of traffic, it's a little bit of shade, that sealer is going to last a lot longer.
But technically they could, that's a whole new look if they do put that sheen on, once every couple of years. You're taking something and just freshening up the look of it.
Right, and the thing to consider about that is once you start down that path, you're sort of stuck down it, because if you stop doing it, you'll have parts of the patio which don't get a lot of traffic that'll stay shiny, and the parts that do, where it wears off a little quicker, is going to look a little worn. So once you start to seal it, you kind of got to stick with it. And it looks, the older sealers looked like your patio was wet, and most people didn't like that look.
Well, yeah, I don't see that often, but again, that was a trend at one point.
It was.
Watering your evergreens.
You want to, not just your evergreens, but all your plants need to be watered into the fall.
But you don't want to overwater, right? You and I talked about that 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yes. Watering, underwatering, and overwatering can kill a plant just as quick. So you want to be right in that happy medium, and you want to water into the fall until we get a good frost, because you want to make sure that soil is nice and moist for the wintertime. Keeps the plant roots moist, which if your plant roots dry out, that'll kill the plant really quickly in the wintertime.
But there is an overwatering factor to it, right?
Yes.
So you've got to, what's the rule of thumb for you?
Oh, usually I encourage people to move the mulch, go down into the soil and feel the soil. It should feel cool and moist, and shouldn't feel soggy or overly wet. And this is something that is an awful fun tip, is smell your soil.
Like actually put it to your face.
Put it to your face and smell. It should smell like soil. It shouldn't really smell good or bad. It should just smell kind of indifferent. It should have an odor to it, but not a strong odor. If it smells musty, then guess what? It's probably too wet. Usually you can pick that out. And if you try to get the soil out and you can't get any out because it's too hard, well, it's probably too dry.
Right.
Very, very technical things.
Yeah, it seems it's going to be real hard to follow, but I think that's a good tip.
It is, and that's what we had that with a client where they were overwatering a little bit, and that's how we told them. And they're like, "Well, how do you know?" And like, "Well, come here, feel the soil. It's sopping wet, falling, and you could smell an odor of it. It was very strong."
So as far as we went with evergreens, number 9 is doing pruning. Now, when I showed this to you, you didn't seem to like that very much.
Well, the list says heavy pruning, but every plant is different, so you have to know what you're pruning.
So it's not a general...
No, that is definitely not a general rule.
But what is funny is this came from the Home and Garden web, like this tip specifically. And when it said heavy, I thought that seems a little bit too much, because it doesn't say for these specific plant groupings. It's almost like go and yank that everywhere.
Yeah. Heavy pruning in some plants can promote strong growth. And if you prune something heavy in the fall and it starts to, regenerate and push out new growth, and we have a frost, that can really damage a plant. Also, heavy pruning, if you're pruning a plant, we've talked about this before, lilacs need to be pruned after they're done flowering. So if you prune your lilacs really heavily, you've pruned off all the flower for the next year. So you pruning is encouraged, but you have to be specific and you have to know what you're pruning. If you just want to give a plant a little haircut, we want to promote, the first few years of pruning should be promoting even growth. You want to make sure all the plants are growing in a similar shape. Usually that's fine for most every plant. But when you want to talk about heavy pruning or specific pruning, you need to look up what you have. And there's, tons of websites you can look things up and find out tips.
Well, here, the last one's the easiest one, and it's good because we're almost out of time. I want you to summarize this. Pack up for the winter. Now, I can tell you one piece that was important in here was getting your hoses, getting the water out, that kind of thing. Is there anything else that they have to be wary of leaving out?
Sharpen your blades. I know specifically there was a house on 161 by the Worthington Alternative School who I think they had their hose on all winter long. And at one point in the winter, there was water all over the side of the house because that hose bib blew off. So unhook your hoses so it doesn't freeze. Sharpen your tools, put them away. I would try to teach my son this. You gotta take care of your tools
He
because
probably
they'll
saw
take care of you.
Frozen and thinks it's going to work out. So
No, he does not like that show.
Well, listen, I can't believe we got through all 10.
We made it right through just in time.
That's right. So tell the people again, any questions, comments, emails?
Always, if you want to get a hold of us for a landscape project or to give us some feedback about the show or have your question included, you can call the office, the Greenscapes office at 614-837-1869 or email us at info@greenscapes.net. And we want to thank you for listening today, and please join us again for another exciting edition of Down the Garden Path.